Hey everybody, welcome to the Mother FIGRs Podcast. I'm Katelyn D'Arcangelo, founder and co-owner of Figure, Midwestern wife, and girl mom. I'm a dual certified pregnancy and postpartum trainer, majored in exercise science from the University of Michigan, earned my master in management degree from Duke University, and have been coaching in the fitness industry for over a decade. This podcast dives into all things pregnancy and postpartum fitness, especially in how to navigate strength and intensity training in these seasons. Whether you're in it yourself, trying to get pregnant, or coaching this population, you're in the right place. I'm excited to share personal experiences, client stories, guest interviews, and evidence-based strategies to give you the guidance, insights, and clarity needed to navigate these seasons with confidence. And with that, let's get rolling. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Mother FIGRs Podcast. Today's episode is going to be pelvic floor and deep core 101. So I've hinted and talked about these concepts in a lot of my podcast episodes. So I wanted to create one that is just like the high level, the basics, what you need to know, that can be applied to fitness, that can be applied to symptom management, that can be applied to anything. And even though this is like pregnancy and postpartum related, the pelvic floor and deep core systems obviously are impactful whether you are pregnant, postpartum, or not. So this can be really good information for you to know whether or not you are in these seasons currently or in the future. So first of all, the pelvic floor. So the main thing to know about the pelvic floor, it is a group of muscles and connective tissue located at the bottom of the pelvis. So we have that bony structure. It's a lot easier when you have like a anatomical figure. I have like this plaster pelvis model thing that I love bringing out in all of my courses and stuff. But it is a group of muscles that is at the bottom of the pelvis. So if we did not have something, connecting us at the bottom, everything inside would just fall out, all of our organs and all of our things. So the pelvic floor is literally just the base of our core canister, and it is a group of muscles and connective tissue. It is a trampoline-like structure, which means that it has responsiveness. So it goes down and it comes up kind of like on a trampoline. When you come down on the trampoline, it caves in. And then when you come off the trampoline or jump up, it kind of responds back. So we want this responsive or fluctuating feature of the muscles in the pelvic floor. It used to be called or referred to as like a hammock, but a hammock is just kind of just sits there and sinks. It's not very responsive. So trampoline is a better mental picture of what these muscle groups do, or what this muscle group does. Another thing to note is it has 4 different quadrants. So there's a front half and a back half, and then a left side and a right side, and different quadrants or different halves, different areas in general can have different symptoms or different features like tension or weakness or strength compared to the other areas. So it is split up into quadrants, and that is something that a pelvic floor therapist would do like an internal assessment on, or can feel like the exact muscle groups that are firing or that are tense or that are not firing. So that would be within the scope of a pelvic floor therapist, but just for your basic knowledge, 4 different quadrants, different areas can have different symptoms. And then in general of like where it attaches to, so the pelvic floor attaches in the very front to the pubic bone. So like that hard bony structure in the front of your pelvis. And then it attaches all the way to the tailbone in the very back. And then on the sides, it attaches to your sit bone. So it has this like diamond shaped structure that's attaching to all of the lower or underneath pieces of our bony pelvis. And the pelvic floor has a lot of different functions. There's 5 specific ones that I want to address. So first is it supports or holds up our internal organs. So without the pelvic floor, our organs would just fall through the open hole in the bottom of our pelvis. So the pelvic floor plays a crucial role in just keeping our organs inside our core system. Another function is it controls the holes, I like to say. So it let things go when we want them to go out. So like pee and poop, and then it keeps things in when we want to keep things in. So there's like this sphincteric property of the muscle surrounds the holes or the openings in the bottom of our pelvic floor, so that we can have sexual function, we have peeing, and we have pooping, all those kind of things. So that's number 2. Number 3 is sexual function. So it plays a role in that, contracting and releasing. Number 4, it helps in stabilizing the body. So this is where we get into the exercise pieces, these next 2 features of the pelvic floor. So the pelvic floor is actually part of our deepest layer or deep stability system, and it is anticipatory. So this muscle will fire before you go into any movement. So it is crucial in helping the pelvis stabilize so that we can go into any movement. If you think about the pelvis in isolation, like a skeleton, essentially, like how they're just floating all over the place, they have no stability. Without the pelvic floor at the bottom and then the deep core attaching to the top of the pelvis, we'd just be a skeleton or like a lump of logs. Like we would just be all over the place. So the pelvic floor has a huge role in the stability of the body. And again, it is anticipatory. And then lastly, it helps manage pressure alongside the deep core muscles. So the pelvic floor is part of this pressure management system, which ties into our breath work. And that's a whole topic of its own, is breath work, but it helps manage pressure by relating to the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is the top, pelvic floor is on the bottom, and it responds to the diaphragm, which is our breathing muscle, to help us manage pressure within the deep core system so we can help with strength considerations, but also with symptom management pieces. So we're not having incontinence or prolapse or heaviness feelings or like diastasis in the core. So in general, it just helps manage pressure. So those are the main roles of the pelvic floor and kind of where it is, where it's connected to, and basic properties. And then we get to the deep core muscles. So the deep core is the transverse abdominis muscle, or TA, and it is also the deepest layer of muscle, but now it's in the core system. So the pelvic floor is the deepest layer on the base or the bottom of the pelvis. The deep core transverse abdominis is the deepest layer of muscle in our core system. So the next thing inside of our deep core transverse abdominis is our organs and our internal body. It wraps around our body in a horizontal manner, which is why it's called transverse abdominis. The muscle fibers literally run horizontal. And it originates from the fascia in the back and then connects in the front. It wraps all the way around horizontally, connecting to the ribs at the top, the linea alba connective tissue down the center of our core, and then it attaches on the top of our pelvis of the iliac crest and then the pubic bone in the front. So just like how the pelvic floor connects to all the bony pieces at the bottom of the pelvis, the deep core is connected to all of the top pieces of the pelvis. And this deep core muscle acts like a corset for our midsection. Sometimes it's literally called the corset muscle because it acts to, like, when it engages, it kind of like, swooshes in. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It acts like a corset, like as if you're pulling a corset, it just sucks everything in. So those muscles, the deep core muscles and the pelvic floor muscles, are part of a deeper system. So the deep core system itself has 4 different pieces. First is the diaphragm, which I alluded to before, which is the top of the canister, the top of the core canister. That's piece number 1 of the deep core system. Part number 2 is the pelvic floor. So that's directly below it. So diaphragm, pelvic floor are stacked on top of each other when we're doing things properly. Part 3 of the deep core system is the transverse abdominis, so that deep core muscle that wraps around the core canister. And then we have the multifidus, which is the muscle that's kind of like stabilizing the spine in the back. So that's like kind of holding everything together. So this is our whole core canister or deep core system. Diaphragm on top, pelvic floor on bottom, a multifidus in the back, and then transverse abdominis that wraps around everything. And this is altogether your body's first layer of stability and engagement, which is not just active when we're lifting, but involved in literally every single daily task. So that's why during postpartum, when those muscles are stretched and lax from pregnancy, and we no longer have the internal pressure of our baby inside from, during pregnancy. This is why we feel so loose or so weak and so uncoordinated, or sometimes you'll experience like this waterbed feeling in your core because it's not stable anymore. There's no more pressure or tension being generated by these muscle groups. And so you just feel very lax and very out of sorts in those early days postpartum. So the deepest layer of our whole body is this deep core system. These muscles, specifically the pelvic floor and transverse abdominis, so the deep core muscles, they co-contract to help stabilize the body. So they work at the same time. They fire at the same time when those systems are working properly. They also work together to manage internal pressure, and then they also work together to produce muscle tension and force, which is also why we kind of group pelvic floor and deep core exercises as one. If you hear something called like a pelvic floor exercise, it's really the breath plus the deep core plus the pelvic floor that's all working in sync. You cannot really isolate the two muscles. They work as a unit to help stabilize and manage pressure. The other piece to consider is that since both the pelvic floor and the deep core are muscles, they can be influenced by exercise. So yes, in severe or bigger cases, surgery might be needed to help restore core strength or pelvic floor, prolapse sometimes is healed by surgery. However, because they are both muscle groups, we can influence and strengthen those muscles after having babies, after injury, to help rehab them. So rehab or exercise and, manual rehab should be the first step to healing, not going straight to surgery. That's a whole nother topic, and that's kind of out of the scope of an exercise professional. It goes kind of into the surgery and pelvic floor realm, but just know that since they are both muscles, they have muscular properties, which means they can be influenced and strengthened and healed, hopefully, by exercise. So that's kind of just basic what the pelvic floor is, what the deep core muscles are, where they're at, how they work together. There's 4 different considerations or concepts in general to know about the pelvic floor and deep core as it relates to exercise. One is the range of motion. So just like a muscle needs to go through its full range of motion to have the optimal functionality of that muscle, same thing with the pelvic floor and the deep core muscles. They need to go through full range of motion, just like any other muscle, in order to fire optimally. The problem is that most of us walk around tense and tight and sucking in and holding in. And so these muscles are constantly strained and constantly in a state of tension. And so if a muscle is tight all day, like for instance, if you're holding a fist and you're tensing up, if you try to tense up anymore or engage any deeper, you're already so tight or so tense that you can't really get a proper muscle engagement until you first release that tension or that fist, and then you squeeze back in, and then you get a way stronger contraction out of it. Same thing with the pelvic floor. If we have a tense pelvic floor and a tight pelvic floor, and then we ask it to contract so that we can do a heavier lift or something, that's when we experience symptoms, because there is just no more muscular force happening within the pelvic floor, has nothing else to give, and so it just fatigues out and it symptoms occur. So we want to be able to lengthen the pelvic floor through our breath and lengthen those muscles and the deep core as well, so that when we need to engage and we need to contract that muscle in order to do work, then it can do its job optimally. So yes, we need to work Kegels. We need to be able to strengthen our pelvic floor. We need to be able to contract it. But sometimes the lengthening piece is actually the key here, because we're just in a state of tension so much. So we need to be able to both lengthen and contract. That's for both the pelvic floor and the core. So we need that full range of motion, that full muscular capacity of the pelvic floor and deep core. Number 2 main concept is force. So we don't want the pelvic floor to just be super strong. We want it to be able to fire with an appropriate amount of force for the task at hand. So for instance, the core system should not have to work in the same capacity when picking up a piece of paper as it would when lifting a heavy barbell. Makes sense. But sometimes we over squeeze or do 100%, pelvic floor contraction or 100% core contraction when all we have to do is a little head lift. We should not have to over squeeze or over stress the system just to do the smallest amount of work. We want a little bit of contraction here, a lot of contraction here. We don't want this overuse principle to come into play, because that can lead to quicker fatigue, reduced effectiveness, and just both of those things will lead to potential symptoms. So we want the appropriate amount of force when doing whatever the task is. Third is coordination. So the timing of a pelvic floor contraction can also play into whether you're experiencing symptoms or not. So this plays into optimal function and symptom management specifically. So the pelvic floor and deep core, they should be able to fire quickly and at the right time when we sneeze, and also have the endurance and fluidity to last when you're out for a long run. So the timing, if you're like engaging the deep core and pelvic floor too early, and then you're fatiguing out by the time the work actually comes, or vice versa, you're doing the work and then you're engaging and then you're contracting. Both of those scenarios can lead to symptoms, even though you're doing the breath work or the contraction appropriately. We need the correct coordination and the correct timing, and also have these like kind of fast twitch, slow twitch properties where we want it to be able to fire quickly and hard, like a sneeze and a cough are really a max contraction of the pelvic floor. That's how much pressure is being how much pressure is happening within our core system during those movements. But we also want the pelvic floor to be able to last fluidly if we're out for an endurance style activity. So a lot of pieces there. And then fourth, and I hinted at this before too, is just tension. So both weakness and tightness in the pelvic floor can lead to symptoms. It's not just a weak pelvic floor. That tightness and that tension is a huge, crucial factor, a huge concept to know. So tightness and tension can a lot of times manifest itself as back pain, as physical weakness in the gym or in just daily tasks. It can manifest in leaking or heaviness. And again, like I said, with 4 different pelvic floor quadrants, the pelvic floor can simultaneously be functional in some areas, but symptomatic in others. And that's a scope for pelvic floor therapists to determine. But in general, tension is one of the bigger players when it comes to symptoms in general. This was actually the case for me during my pregnancy. I went when I was, I think, 17, 18-ish weeks, and I was having incontinence in the front half of the pelvic floor, obviously, that I hadn't experienced before. And so when I went in, she tested my pelvic floor, did an internal assessment, and the back half of my pelvic floor was super tight. So it wasn't really doing its job back there. So I was experiencing symptoms in the front. So the two halves can play together huge. And we want to make sure everything is coordinating, is being able to be lengthened, and that tightness or that tension piece, again, can play into symptoms way more than we think. And honestly, probably way more than weakness itself has to do with it. So that is kind of all I wanted to touch on in this specific podcast episode. Obviously, there is a whole network and information, and there's so much more that goes into it, but this is just the high level. Like if this is the first time you've been introduced to the concept of the pelvic floor and core, just wanted to give high level muscular, where it is, how it's connected, how it coordinates, what it does. So you guys can hopefully be more informed as you go into more depth of these topics, if that's what you choose to do, which I do hint on these or touch on these in a lot of my other podcast episodes. So hop into those. This is also straight from my Mother FIGRs coaches course. So I train local coaches who are already in a class setting how to work with pregnant and postpartum clients. So this is kind of the foundation that I start to build off of. And it's also what I go through in my 6-week postpartum course where I walk new moms through returning to fitness. So that is the basics. And I'll get into more depth with other topics, but wanted to keep this one nice and short, nice and concise, so you guys can have some more knowledge in your pocket. So with that, I will see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Mother FIGRs Podcast. If these episodes help or resonate with you in any way, it would be so helpful to the show if you could leave a review so we can get this into more moms' hands. And if you're looking for even more guidance and direction when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum fitness, I got you covered. My Mother FIGRs app subscription includes my Figure Pregnancy and Figure Postpartum workout programs, in addition to our general fitness programs. You'll get the day-by-day workouts you need to help you feel strong, pain-free, and labor-ready during pregnancy, and also the recovery, strength, and progressions you'll need to get back to the activities you love, full of strength and without symptoms after baby arrives. If you're local to the Brighton, Michigan area, I also host daily women's functional fitness classes, a 6-week postpartum return to fitness course, and pregnancy and postpartum consultation sessions. For those who are providers, coaches, or practitioners in the space, I hold a live Mother FIGRs certification course that equips you with the knowledge, tools, and confidence to train and work with this population. For information on all of these services and programs, make sure to check out fitisgettingreal.com/moms or head to the show notes for the direct link. I'm so thankful that you tuned in today's episode, and I will catch you next time.